Hello everyone, I'm Kimberly, this is Raymond. We co-directed the show. This is the Rhino Monologues, and it was a senior project or an ISP, I'm honestly not sure, that my best friend Emily Axelberg did last year. She conducted interviews with many people in the Taft, many people in the Taft community, and then wrote monologues based on the interviews that she had, based on the stories that they told her. And so it was meant to give a platform for these people's stories that would be consequence-free and anonymous. So she wanted to kind of shed light on stories that you don't always get to hear through creating this play. So she gave us those monologues, and we kind of strung them together into a cohesive performance for all of you. So I really hope that you enjoy it. Logistic-wise, please turn off your cell phones and please don't use them during the performance. We've had some people using them the past couple days. It's been really distracting. And yeah, I think that's all. Yeah. Oh, and one more thing. If you have to leave, please do it in the applause during, in between monologues rather than in the middle of one. That'd be awesome. Thank you.
So I have come a quick announcement to make, and this is to re-emphasize the point that Mr. Mack talked about in assembly today. So there has been an incident, an event at Kent that some of you may be aware of, and soon perhaps you'll definitely hear about it. And what we take from it is also the purpose of these monologues, which is about community, in that we're made up of individuals, and each individual's background, identity, and stories are all unique, sometimes fragile, but all beautiful. And as a community, I think it is important for us to support each other, and the emphasis is always, you are not alone, and which is what I'm going to tell all of you, and what you need to tell all of your friends and everyone you know in this community, in that there's always someone around who's willing to help, who's willing to listen, understand, and respect your special, your uniqueness and your story. So this is also what the monologues are about giving the voice to those who usually are not heard. So, thank you.
I'm going to level with you here. I seem, and I know I seem, like the typical Taft girl. Right now you're thinking, just another pretty girl with long hair and bean boots. I know I look like a lot of the girls here, but I'm not. I think my Taft experience has been interesting because one would assume that it's been easy for me here, but it hasn't. When I got to Taft, I felt confident about myself. I knew I was smart, I was from New York, I'd socialized with the same sorts of people I knew I would find here, but the more time I spent here, the more something felt off. I was always on the fringe of my friend group, never completely included, and I didn't know why. But one day, something clicked. I realized I was a lot bigger than some of my other friends here. I thought, wow, look how much fatter my face is. Look how much bigger my arms and legs are. I knew immediately that this was why I didn't fit in. It was the only thing I could find that made me different from the rest of my popular friends. So I made up my mind to change it, and I did change it. But I didn't exactly know a healthy way to go about doing it. When I went home that summer, I started eating 400 calories a day and not exercising because I read that cutting calories and exercising made you bulky, and I didn't want that. None of the girls in my friend group at Taft were bulky. I would eat 2 egg whites in the morning, and if I had a good day the day before, I would eat it with 2 tablespoons of salsa.
If I was going to eat anything sweet, I'd eat sriracha sauce first because it speeds up your metabolism. I would eat about 16 almonds throughout the day, 3 rice cakes maybe. At dinner time, I would say I wasn't hungry, so I would eat vegetables or a small portion of whatever we were having. If I was really hungry, I would drink tea or, very rarely, a cup of 25-calorie diet hot chocolate. It was definitely a bleak summer, but I didn't necessarily notice what was going on because I was losing weight, and that's what I set out to do, so I felt good about it. When I got back to Taft, people noticed. They said things like, "Whoa, what did you lose, like 25 pounds or something? And dude, what happened?" It was uncomfortable. I mean, I didn't like the attention I was getting even though I thought I would. I started avoiding people, wearing bigger clothes to hide my body, and hardly ever leaving my room. I realized that one of the main motivators for what I was doing was dances. I didn't want to worry about my spandex being too tight or my top being too cropped. Now I didn't even want to go to dances. Unfortunately, with the stress of junior year, I fell more and more into the vicious cycle of anorexia. By this point, I knew I had a problem. I knew I wasn't headed in a good direction, so when I went home for fall long weekend, I thought I might tell my parents. I was trying on a pair of pants that I had from sophomore year, and my mom saw me in them, and she said, "So help me God, if you have an eating disorder, you're going to be right back home in New York. You're not going to be at Taft anymore. This is unacceptable." The prospect of leaving school scared me, so I thought, okay, well, I can't tell her. When I got back to school, I started purging. Once I did it twice in one day. That was the day I told my sister I was struggling. She told me to go out that night and have fun and not worry about what I was eating or anything. I tried to take her advice. I went out and I got ice cream that night. And then I came back to school and I made myself throw up. I was playing in a field hockey game a few days later and I blacked out. By then I just knew I wasn't okay. I called my dad of all people and I told him I was struggling. When I went home for Thanksgiving break, I started to get help. That in itself is a difficult process because you don't want to gain weight, but you want to get better, and you can't have both. I think I struggled with that because I went from, oh, they're calling me fat sophomore year to they're calling me anorexic junior year. All of this stems from an attempt to fit in and be happy that failed miserably. I think Taft is a breeding grounds for eating disorders. We all live on top of each other, and the sisterhood culture of girls here makes disordered eating almost inevitable. One of your friends will say, "Oh, I feel so fat. I'm going on a diet this week," or "I look terrible. I'm going on a cleanse," and girls feed off that energy from one another. When your friends are doing it, and they're already skinnier than you feel like you don't have any other choice. I also think the stress of this environment is a huge contributing factor. This place can make you feel like you don't have any control, and so you start counting calories. I used my eating disorder to regain a sense of control and relieve my anxiety and stress. I've been frustrated with the way we handle eating disorders in community. We pretend that they don't exist in a lot of ways, We place a lot of emphasis and resources on the boys' drug and alcohol problems, but when a girl has an eating disorder, it's usually, oh, just send her home or weigh her every day. There's no need to call attention to this issue. It's a double standard, and frankly, this is something that needs to be talked about. Because eating disorders are deadly, and they'll impact a bunch of girls in this community for the rest of their lives. I've tried to reach out to people, teachers, saying, let's talk about this. You have a student who's willing to tell people what she went through. Let's make progress with this. But no one has really taken the bait. If we all work together, that's the only way that we're going to make progress with this issue. We need to offer support and resources to those who are struggling. The only community address last year about eating disorders was given by a student. I think that's unacceptable. I want this message to be a hopeful one. Because I had anorexia at Taft, and I recovered at Taft. It is possible. Know that there's hope, and if we all work together, we can fix this issue. Support your friends, support your students. It's up to us now.
You know that Charles Dickens quote, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times? Whenever people ask me what Taft has been like, I usually tell them that. It was basically a series of extreme highs and extreme lows for 4 years. I met some of the greatest people ever, and some of the worst. Sounds like something out of Mean Girls. As for extreme highs, I'd say that the relationships that I formed with students and faculty here at Taft have been by far the most important aspect of my time here. I've absolutely loved taking video with Mr. Seraphine and learning to express myself through images. And the English teachers here are also incredible. I've absolutely loved, especially Mr. Shotlow's English class. And it was unbelievable, actually life-changing. The friendships that I've formed at Taft have been some of the best that I've ever had. And I think that there's something about this experience and about being here that makes friendships like that possible. So long as you don't get too bogged down in insecurity. That was a huge problem for me my sophomore year. I liked this guy, and I was friends with his friends, and we were buddies, it was good. And I told him that I liked him, I got dared to. And he didn't really say anything about it, and I think that should have been some kind of a warning sign. But he started going out with my best friend, and that was fine. I made peace with it right away. It wasn't really about him anymore. But when they were together, they were just awful to me. And he teased me about the fact that I liked him. And it was awful because I felt like somehow I wasn't good enough, and she was, and I had lost both of them when they were together. I got to thinking, well, of course they'd choose the other over me. It was really hard to be friends with her, even before that, because she was always the type of girl that guys liked, and I wasn't ever like that. A lot of the choices that I made that year were because I didn't want to feel insecure anymore. I hooked up with a lot of guys I didn't like, but I liked that they liked me, and I felt like I needed that to believe that I was worthy of any sort of love. And that insecurity isn't something that's gone away at my time at Taft. I still feel like I'm not enough somehow. Not pretty enough, not skinny enough, not Greenwich enough, whatever. And I think that a lot of people feel like that at Taft because there's so much pressure to be popular and to hook up with guys. And I think a lot of people are like me and they don't really know how to do that, but their friends do, so it's really hard to be the person who feels like you're clueless. There's so many rules about who you can be and how you should be that person. It's literally impossible to keep track. It's impossible to be who you're supposed to be, so everyone feels insecure in one way or another. At Taft, you're stuck in this bubble, as they like to call it. So the pressure to fit in feels inescapable and magnified. You feel like Taft is the only thing that exists, and if you can't fit in here, you're basically fucked for life, which is kind of a soul-crushing feeling. And I think that everyone living in the same place is definitely both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, you're surrounded by all of the people that you love all the time, and all your friends are in this with you, and your whole life is basically a common experience. And I think that that's why you can create such incredible bonds here. On the flip side, I think that the bubble is the reason the hookup culture is so bizarre. You can't really go with anyone on a date, and you can't really meet anyone outside of school. So you're stuck with the same people in the same places for 4 years. Experiences layer on top of places, and the English classroom where you formed a really great relationship with your teacher is the same place where you drunkenly lost your virginity after D2I. It's definitely a unique experience and can be really difficult to navigate, especially if you're insecure in any capacity. And I don't think people acknowledge very often how hard it is just to be here sometimes. To truly be yourself here is no small feat, but I think that most people would like it to be easier. There's a line from a play I was in my junior year about the people of the town that the play was set in, and they're described as good, simple people with only the best of intentions. And even after all the shit that I went through at Taft, I think this is basically true of everyone. I think we just need to learn how to be those people a little bit more often.
When I think Taft, I think opportunity. There are so many opportunities here, and the students have the chance to make whatever they want of their experiences. I think sky is really the limit in this case. Take day students, for example. There are vastly different day student opportunities, depending on whether or not the student wants to be involved. If the student chooses to be involved and spend time on campus, they can make their experiences great. I think that's true of everyone in this community. We each have the power to make whatever we want of our experiences at Taft, even though it might be difficult at times. Deciding on who gets the access to Taft opportunity is a complicated process. And sometimes it doesn't seem fair. You might have two kids who both seem equally qualified, and one's a dancer from Denver, and the other one is really interested in astronomy from Montreal. They're both different and gifted in their own ways, but you only have a spot for one of them. You have to think, who could contribute the most to our community at the time you're considering their application? You have to decide who would make the most out of their experiences here. Sometimes, students end up here who don't seem like the best fit, and they end up being one of the best students we've had. kids who start out not fitting in or doing particularly well can come out to have very meaningful and positive experiences at Taft. You just never know. I think it can sometimes take time to realize what this experience means to you. I got a text a few days ago from a former advisee. She's at Colby now, and she said, out of the blue, that she'll never forget her Taft experience. She was only a PG, only here for 1 year, and yet it meant that much to her. Last Saturday, I went to a wedding of another former advisee from 15 years ago, and she talked about how grateful she was about all the opportunities that Taft gave her. 15 years later, and she's still talking about Taft. That's pretty remarkable. That's how you know that the opportunities here are worthwhile. I hope that all the students realize how fortunate they are to be a part of this community and to have access to all the opportunities that Taft has to offer, and that they take the most out of their respective experiences, even though it might be difficult at times. The more you put into Taft, the more you'll get out of it. You reap what you sow.
I love Taft. I love the community. I love the traditions. I love the school pride we have. I love playing pond hockey in the winter and can jam in the spring. I love going to the jig during scene to buy a pint of Ben & Jerry's and splitting it with my friends. The little details like that are what make this place special. My favorite moment from my Taft experience was Hotchkiss Day last year. During my volleyball game, I looked out from the court and saw the bleachers completely filled with red. Everybody was cheering and going crazy. In that moment, we were all together with such intensity. I could feel everybody's support, and I knew that everybody in the crowd wanted to see me succeed. That's such a great feeling. I've made some amazing bonds at Taft. I've had basically the same friend group for 4 years, and we've gotten extremely close in that time. I think Taft makes friendships like that possible because we spend so much time with each other, way more than kids at normal high schools. We go to class together, play sports together, and live together in dorms. We basically spend every waking minute with our friends, so we get to know them really well in a way that wouldn't be possible outside of Taft. I'm really grateful for that. However, when you spend that much time with the same people, you're bound to get annoyed with them. I love my friends, I really do. But sometimes, they suck. People at Taft, girls in my friend group included, are really cliquey. We say we're not, but we so are. When you're on the inside of the group, it feels great. But there have been periods of my time at Taft when I felt completely ostracized by my friends. And since I don't really know anyone else, that has been so shitty. When you feel excluded, you pull away even more because you don't want to be annoying, but you end up feeling so fucking lonely. I mean, if you don't have your friends, what do you have? What's Taft without the people who are here? It sucks. It's enough to make you want to try to keep fitting in at all costs. A big part of avoiding being ostracized by my friends was learning the girl code at Taft. There are a lot of rules to being a girl here if you want to fit in. And if you don't figure them out quickly, you suffer the social consequences. A lot of the rules have to do with hooking up with guys. And I fucked up quite a few times before I learned what those rules are. My freshman year, I got with a lot of guys for Taft standards. I was the center of attention in a bad way. People called me a slut. I wasn't promiscuous by any definition. I just wasn't following the rules. It sucks because when guys get with a lot of girls, they're celebrated and they become more popular. But when girls do it, they risk losing their friends and their social standing. Doesn't make any sense. It's impossible to keep all the rules straight. You have to be consistently hooking up with someone, but you can't get with more than 4 guys in a single school year. You have to be with them for at least 2 months. You have to report every single detail, every single hookup in excruciating detail within 10 minutes of signing in after the walk back. Only get with the popular guys, and always get with the popular guys who are into you. It doesn't matter if you're attracted to them. Don't kiss on the first walk back, and definitely don't have sex for the first month, or so if you don't want to get gossiped about for weeks. And the list goes on and on. Basically, who you hook up with and how you choose to do it determines your social position as a girl at Taft. It's all anyone seems to care about. Where do you go? What do you do? Who's your next scheme? It's exhausting. My friends love to gossip, and I know it's high school and that shit happens. But like, how bored are you? There's always judgment about every little decision you make. And this is such a small community, which, like I said earlier, can be a great thing because it makes close friendships possible. But it can also make gossip 1,000 times worse. Like I said earlier about Hotchkiss Day last year, this community can be one of the most supportive environments ever. People really do care about each other, which is super rare and special. But the flip side of that is the judgment and the gossip. Sometimes I wish people didn't care quite as much for that reason. But then again, it wouldn't be Taft if people didn't care. My only regret is not branching out more and getting to know more people outside of my immediate friend group. I think if I'd done that, it would have made those moments of feeling ostracized and excluded by my friends a lot easier. I wish I'd been a little less concerned with fitting in perfectly with a particular group and more focused on getting to know as many different types of people as I could. There are so many amazing people here that I don't know. All in all, though, I'm so grateful for my Taft experience and for all the friends I've made here, even though it wasn't always easy.
I do, on paper, a lot of volunteer work. I'm on volunteer board, I'm on Red Rhino Fund, and I'm a co-head of Operation Smile. I've enjoyed all of these experiences, and I do genuinely believe that volunteer work is important. However, I will not deny that my participation in these activities was primarily driven by the desire to fluff up my college resume. Doing volunteer work is absolutely a service to yourself. It makes you look good. Does that make it wrong? Obviously not. The hungry people still get their soup. I think it's disingenuous on Taft's part if we try and pretend that we view service in a purely altruistic way. I have found service to be very personally fulfilling, and I wouldn't have discovered my genuine love for helping others if I hadn't first wanted to look good at the admissions office at Dartmouth. There's nothing wrong with that though, right? It's still non-ut Sibi.
I love the motto. The idea of service to others has really shaped what I want to do with my life. So I'm glad that service is an important fabric of our Taft experience. People often complain that service is not an important part of Taft life, but I don't think that they realize that service can definitely be if you make it so. Personally, I did volunteering as an ex, and on top of that, I've gone to a homeless shelter quite a few Fridays. I have made it a point to prioritize service at Taft, and so far it has been really rewarding for me. The way it is now, service is not an important part of Taft life. But that's what real service is anyway. You have to motivate yourself to do so. Motivation matters. You have to motivate yourself to serve others. It's up to you to prioritize service at Taft and in your life. And that's non-food Sibi.
It might not make sense from an outside perspective why a lot of the guys getting in trouble for drugs are athletes. You may think, oh, they know better, or oh, they care too much about their sport to jeopardize anything. But there's so much more to the using culture at Taft than just guys who are bored and need something to do on a Friday night. Young athletes grow up with this suck it up and walk it off mentality that dealing with pain and injury. And this mindset directly translates to how they deal with emotional pain later in life. When they're struggling, they choose not to say anything. They internalize it because they were taught not to complain about physical pain. The week that I got my strike for drinking was the week that my stepdad left our family. He left on my birthday. That hurt, and I wasn't even able to make the connection between that event and the fact that I started drinking so much that week. The night I got caught, my hockey bus left 5 minutes early because, everyone was already on the bus, and they left me at school. And yeah, I was injured, so I wasn't playing or practicing at the time, but still, I had already felt so isolated, and then they left me at school. It really stung. I got caught stumbling around later that night, and that's when I got my strike. After that, I was able to talk to my teachers and coaches about what I had been doing. Drinking, smoking, all that. I told them what was going on with me, how lonely I felt and everything, and it really helped. You see, it's really quite easy for an athlete who feels lonely or insecure to turn to drugs at Taft. Because, let's face it, most of the athletes here were the shit in middle school or whatever high school they went to before Taft. Captain of every team, MVP every season, stuff like that. But when they get here, that all changes. Because not everyone can be the best. Guys wrap their identities up in their performance in sports, and as soon as they're not the best anymore, they lose a lot of self-confidence. So they need a way to distinguish themselves. So they turn to drugs. It becomes a competition, a sort of hierarchy. It's a whole other aspect of your identity. I, for example, can play lacrosse. I can also sing, and I can get totally fucked up and still talk to teachers. It's another thing that we use to set ourselves apart from other guys. And yeah, sure, it can be fun, but I think most of it comes from a place of deep insecurity. Now, I think that most of the administration's attempts to curb drug use are better than others, knowing what I know about usage at Taft. For example, I think the Xbox initiative is a really, really good one, because guys use video games to hang out and talk with their friends. It sounds dumb, I know, but it works. Drugs are a community activity, but so are video games. So playing Xbox just decreases the amount of time that people feel like they want to be getting high. Now, things like Chris Herron's talk and the drug talk that I went to after I got caught talking to a dealer, those are harder to understand from a student's perspective. They feel like half-assed attempts to address the emotional issues at stake, and they really miss the mark. And I know, the administration is trying, and it's clear that we're moving in the right direction. But there's still a lot of progress that needs to be made. At the drug talk that I went to, they basically told us they were going to start policing more. That they didn't want to catch us, but they had to find a way to get us to stop. And I mean, I know that desperate times call for desperate measures, but that's not addressing the problem! If something like that issue with a dealer happens on such a large scale, then clearly there is some underlying problem that needs to be addressed. It just makes it worse for those kids who already feel so lonely and so unwanted. when teachers start stopping by their rooms at odd hours of the day to catch them doing drugs. Not to ask how they're doing or anything like that. I guess what I wanted to say is that we don't want to be degenerates. We want to do well. We're not lazy. We care about school and sports and stuff. And I think if we, as a community, really reached out more, offered more support, then we could see some real improvement in this issue. Granted, it wouldn't completely go away. It's high school and there's always going to be some drug activity, but it wouldn't have to be this prevalent.
Like many students, I didn't really have a sense of self during my freshman year at Taft. I was very malleable. I used to stare at this beautiful, popular white girl in my history class and think, she's so gorgeous. All the boys like her. What can I do to be more like her? I noticed she wore MEJ hair ties. And it sounds so silly, but I thought that if I got them, it would make me more popular or appealing or something. I went home for break and I told my friends that we had to get MEJs. I told my friend that we had to go to Saks Fifth Avenue because I had looked it up online and I knew they sold them in the hair salon there. I had lived in New York City all of my life and this was the first time I had ever been to Saks Fifth Avenue. I couldn't afford anything in that store more expensive than some knotted hair elastics. I got the hair ties, and when I got back to Taft, I wore them every single day, like a badge of honor. I would take them off before I showered or played sports, just to make sure they didn't break or fray, and I would keep them in the plastic when I got home. They were that important to me. It sounds ridiculous, but they felt like they were my entrance ticket to Taft. They made me feel like I was actually a part of this community. I finally fit in. All because of a hair tie? After the hair ties, I got a Patagonia and some Lulus and I felt unstoppable. It was ridiculous. I had gone to Taft for 4 years and this was the first time that I felt good about myself. I was happy with the way I was before, but changing my clothes didn't make me more popular. I'm not white and I'm not wealthy, but I still have just as much of a right to be part of this community as anyone else here. I just wish I'd been able to see that from the beginning.
I think a lot of people make the mistake of viewing the Taft experience as one universal experience that everyone in this community has. People have an idea in their heads of what it's like to go to a Northeastern prep school, an image of the privileged children of the 1% learning how to become investment bankers and getting everything fed to them on a silver spoon. It's a lot more complex than that. There's a range of different experiences, and many of them entail a lot of hardship. Now that part doesn't make it into the promotional material. The diversity at Taft is apparent when you look at it from the outside. We have students representing something like 50 countries and 40 states, right? That's pretty incredible. However, this community is still largely upper middle class and white. There's a certain mentality that a student with that background grows up with, and because that's the majority, that mentality becomes the norm. You have to think and act that way to fit in. Otherwise, you're pretty much cast out of the social scene. You see, I had the privilege of coming into Taft as a New York City kid. So even though I didn't experience growing up in Manhattan or attending private schools, I still had a certain Northeastern vibe. At the same time though, I was different because I'm not white and wealthy. So I didn't think like I was white and wealthy. When I got to Taft, the diversity I had was quickly stripped away, simply because I wanted to fit in. I thought, how do I make myself stand out less? How do I look like them? I bought the clothes, the vineyard vine quarter zips, and I started to look like the white, wealthy, and popular kids. But I also started to forget who I was. I grew ashamed of the fact that I'm from the Bronx, that I have immigrant parents, that I'm Hispanic. I was sick and tired of feeling like I had to put on an act 24/7 just to be somebody that I'm not. And that's why I did a year abroad in Spain. In Spain, I found an identity that fit me so much better than the one I had previously forced myself into during my first 2 years at Taft. Doing SYA gave me the opportunity to discover who I am and what's important to me. That's why I'm a feminist, why I support the LGBTQ community, and why I'm so actively involved in social justice movements. I found that in Spain. During my earlier years at Taft, I was just so obsessed with the idea of trying to fit in that none of those issues seemed important to me. Going abroad made me mature enough to be able to come back to Taft and say, you know what, I don't care what anyone says. I am going to be me at Taft. I don't care if I get called a fag or a pussy or whatever. I am just going to do it. And I have. This year, I've tried really hard to stick to the identity I built for myself in Spain. I've had so much fun getting involved and bringing about more space for my culture to become a bigger part of our school's culture. For example, I go to UCT meetings. I'm a part of Latin Dance Club, and I'll sing Spanish music for any one of you guys who'll be willing to listen to me. And guess what? I still have friends. Of course, I'm not especially popular, but that doesn't matter. I have friends who like me for who I am. And I swear, if you dare to be yourself here, you'll find those people too. Taft may have incredible diversity statistics, but what's the point in that if students feel like they have to look and act white? I'm not necessarily blaming Taft for this. It's high school, you're vulnerable, and you feel like fitting in is all that matters. So you change yourself. Because of that though, a lot of the diversity that the school has on its papers just disappears in reality. That's why we all have to make a conscious effort to support students who are trying to make their culture more prevalent in our school. So, if you're part of the minority, be brave and embrace your culture here, because I swear it pays off. And if you're part of the majority, support minority students' efforts to make their culture a bigger part of our school's culture. If we do both of those things, we will have a richer and happier community. And the diversity we brag about in the bulletin may actually become a reality. It really is up to us.
I love this place. It's my favorite place. I'd say it's appropriate that I'm leaving this year, but I'm really going to miss it. I want to teach here and send my kids here. In fact, when I make my billions, I'm donating most of it here. Every day, I find something new to appreciate about this experience. That's how much I love it. I think the reason I appreciate Taft so much now is because I know what it's like to lose it. Last year, I got a really bad concussion in the fall. And from October 3rd, when I had the injury, to January, I couldn't do anything. I couldn't read, my head hurt, I couldn't concentrate. Most of the time I was home, depressed, bored out of my mind. Taft was the home that I had made for myself during my first 2 years, and all of a sudden I had to leave that home. It was taken away in an instant. I wasn't sure that I'd be able to come back because I had to pass my finals in order to return as part of the junior class. For the few weeks that my symptoms were at their worst, I felt sure that after a PE year, or just not come back at all. I was absolutely terrified. And when I learned that I could come back, I cried. I'm not a crier, but when I think about that experience, even now I tear up a little bit. It was so awful, not because of my physical symptoms, but because I wasn't at Taft, where I wanted to be with the people I loved. And when I got back, I felt so welcomed by my friends. And it was clear that my teachers were really happy for me. Actually, I technically shouldn't even be here because I narrowly failed my bio exam. But Miss Guardati gave me the benefit of the doubt because she trusted me. And here I am. I feel so incredibly lucky. That's why I would never do anything to jeopardize my place here. I've never used drugs or alcohol on campus, and I never will. I can't stand to see guys throwing away this opportunity over something that's stupid. It's not that I don't see the appeal, it's just that this experience is worth so much more than that. And I wish everyone saw it that way. I'm actually grateful for the concussion in some ways. It gave me the knowledge that Taft isn't forever. And now I can go the rest of my Taft life with an understanding of what it's like when it's gone. I can truly make the most out of it. It took me a concussion to fully appreciate my experience here, but I hope that not everyone needs a severe head injury to recognize how important Taft is to them.
The gender divide at Taft. It's not the administration. There aren't any rules against guys and girls sitting together in the dining room or forming co-ed friend groups. Sure, we live separately and play sports separately, but that's true at most public high schools, and guys and girls are friends all the time in public schools. At Taft, we self-segregate, and it's so ingrained in our social culture that if you try to go against the grain, you're ridiculed for it. Earlier this year, my friends and I were having a bonfire, and my friend, who's a girl, went over to talk to two guys, and all the boys were like,
Go back to Compton.
We called her a whore. Just for talking to guys who were supposed to be our friends. It was absurd. If you're friends with guys, you're considered a slut. How does that even make any sense? I mean, is it really that weird to talk to a guy without walking back with him?
I think that social expectations have a lot to do with why boys and girls aren't close to Taft. As a girl, I'm expected to care about school, sports, and having the most popular girl group to present to the popular guys as a kind of package deal. Guys are expected to care about sports, drugs, and most of all, the boys. They're only supposed to care about girls in the context of a hookup or a walk back. Otherwise, there are more important things to think about. That sounds awful, but it's true, and it goes both ways. We don't think of each other as friends. I don't think that's how most people want it to be, but it does make some things easier. I mean, you live with all of your best friends, and you don't have to worry about spending time with them during the day. You can just hang out with them in the dorms at night. Since we're so busy here, it's convenient. I do think that boys and girls could benefit from being friends, but a lot would have to change for that to work out.
Most people think of the gender divide as basically harmless. Even if they wished things were different,
They don't consider that guys and girls being so separate could have such serious consequences. Because guys and girls aren't just casual friends at Taft, they don't have the opportunity to get to know each other in a non-sexual, non-romantic context. That makes for an unhealthy hookup culture of objectification and conquest much more likely to develop. I mean, if you don't know someone as a person, it's a lot easier to not view them as one when you're hooking up with them. I know that sounds extreme, but I think it's the truth. And it's not one-sided either. Guys struggle with the gender divide too. It's not as socially acceptable for them to struggle with emotional issues in the same way that girls do. And since they're only friends with guys, they don't have anyone to talk to when they're going through a rough time. I think that contributes to the substance use problem at Taft. And that would explain the stark gender divide in terms of substance use. If guys and girls work together from both sides to decrease the gender divide, I think we'd see improvement in a lot of places where our community is struggling.
Or, more accurately, obsession, disillusionment, recreation. That's the majority of my Taft experience. How others have influenced me in becoming who I am, both by me following them and not following them. My freshman year, there was this group of theater kids I was absolutely obsessed with. We did Les Mis first thing, and the kids who had all the lead roles in that play, they were like gods to me. They were the coolest people that had ever existed. They were the most talented, the most interesting, the most attractive people. I wanted to be them. That's how I work. I idolize people. In the spring of that year, we did this ridiculous play called The Skin of Our Teeth. Not only were all of my closest friends in that play, but those cool theater kids were as well. It should have been the theater dream team. It should have been the best play that ever happened at Taft. But it wasn't. I was really depressed that season. I had to spend hours inside rehearsing that awful play, and all my friends started to hate each other. In the midst of all this, I spent a lot of time with those theater kids I idolized. And the more time I spent with them, observing them interact with each other, the more I realized they weren't idols. They were no gods. One cast member would come into the black box eating a pint of Ben & Jerry's ice cream, and his friends, the kids I worshipped, would say things like, "You're so fat, why are you doing that? And you're so overweight, you need to stop." They would make fun of each other, not necessarily as friends, but in a genuinely mean-spirited way. My image of them as these perfect, happy people slowly started to disintegrate as I watched the way they treated each other and the way they treated themselves. I gradually learned more about them over the course of the season. One girl, in addition to being everyone's drug dealer, got paid to write other people's college essays. One was an alcoholic, and they all smoked a lot of cigarettes. For some reason, the substance abuse really got to me. My friend, another freshman, and I made a video of ourselves backstage during that show, promising that we would never do drugs, ever, because we saw what they could do to people, even gifted people like them. I went on the Pelagian trip to Italy that summer, and it was essentially a bacchanalian festival of drunkenness and revelry. Sometime while we were all in Italy together, they changed in my mind from larger-than-life gods to rival those on Mount Olympus to a group of chain-smoking teenagers that had no idea what they were doing with their lives. There's still a certain romance in that, though. There was one kid I was particularly obsessed with through it all. He, even more than the rest of them, had a degree of perfection that could in no way be seen as human. He was smarter, funnier, more popular, just more than anybody else at Taft by a long shot. There was something else, too, something ineffable, something impossible to pin down. I think it was this quality about him that extended to those in close proximity, that it was his degree of moreness that made his friend group seem like gods from the outside. I was hooked. I would get an adrenaline rush just by talking to him about the weather or my classes. He was that cool. So, when I found out he was taking a gap year after graduation, I was shocked. It blew me away to think that even he might need some time to think about the future, that even he didn't know what to do next. What does it mean when a god takes a gap year? Flash forward to this year. I'm a senior now, and earlier in the year I went to visit one of the girls in that friend group at Yale, and we were hanging out in her room, and it all felt very glamorous to me somehow. And she would ask, you know, do you want some red wine? And I was like, yeah, sure. Do you want some vodka? Yeah, sure. Do you want to go smoke a bowl with me? Yeah, sure, why not? So, there I was, smoking weed with one of the gods of my freshman year. And I thought, wait a second, I've turned into them. I am them. I'm not entirely averse to recreational substance use now. I wouldn't do it regularly or to change my mind in some drastic way, but I like the feeling of not being in control. There's this video of me stumbling around my room, drunk as hell, and I am rubbing deodorant all over my face, and then I crawl underneath my bed and recite a monologue from Macbeth. It's hilarious. It was so fun. So, I'm taking a gap year next year, and I hadn't thought about how it would look to others, or the fact that I'm mirroring that boy I idolized as a freshman, but I'm doing it. 2 years ago, I would have looked at somebody in my position and wondered, wow, why are they doing that? They must really not have their lives together. But now, I'm glad I'm taking a year off school. It feels like a new and improved me making the decision, but who knows? Am I still trying to imitate those seniors I idolized as a freshman, or am I finding my own way, despite the fact that it contradicts what I believed earlier? I don't know. Obsession, disillusionment, recreation. For better or for worse. I used my gap year plans as an excuse to contact that boy about his gap year experience. And we got into this really good conversation about art and his dissatisfaction with art, because in the main, It's something that only the elites have access to. He said this really good line, like, art isn't healing the ravaged world, or something like that. I wish I had more of those conversations with him. That's the problem I have with idolization. It denies their humanity in a way and negates the possibility of a real friendship. As for why I idolize those kids in the first place, I think it has to do with the fact that Taft celebrates people that do awesome things. I certainly do, and I wouldn't change that. I've just learned to be careful about the effect that celebration has on me, how I relate to others, and most importantly, how I choose to be for myself.
When you think of the perfect Taft girl, certain things come to mind. She's skinny with straight brownish, blondish hair and perfect white teeth. She only wears clothes from a select few brands, all of which are just a little too expensive for their product quality. She's not outspoken, but always happy and quirky and fun. She's not too smart for fear of seeming pretentious, but she's smart enough to avoid being called ditzy or dumb. She's kind of athletic, probably plays a varsity sport, but low-key. You've never seen her sweat before. She's kind of social and outgoing, but only hangs out with a select group of girls. And I'm sure you recognize a lot of these qualities in me now, but that wasn't always the case. Freshman year, I was nothing like that girl. I had curly hair and braces and wore clothes from the greater Waterbury area, not New York or Denver or Dallas. I was really muscular and I never wore makeup. I was not as pretty as the rest of the girls in my grade. A lot of people called me a lesbian because I looked different and played sports. Not that there's anything wrong with being gay, that's just not who I was, so it hurt. A lot of guys made fun of me. They had a hot and not list, and I was ranked really, really highly on the not side. Not exactly a confidence boost in your first year of high school. On top of that, I'd always had social anxiety, so it made it really hard for me to make friends. I was friendly with the girls on my sports team, and we would laugh and talk on the fields, but after practice, none of them would want to eat dinner with me. I'd usually just go home and eat alone. I thought that if I looked more like the girls in my grade, I'd make more friends, so I changed a lot about myself. I straightened my hair and I got my braces off and I tried my best to blend in. And the crazy thing is, it actually worked. Like, I wasn't instantly popular or anything, but I had friends, and now I have an amazing group of friends I couldn't even dreamed of having freshman year. I used to get excited if one person wanted to sit with me in the dining hall, and now my friends and I take up an entire table in Prentice. People say hi to me in the hallways now, and I get invited to parties and sleepovers with girls who didn't even know my name freshman year. That's a significant difference. I don't think it all happened solely because I changed my appearance, although it was a big contributing factor. But getting to be a captain of a sports team my junior year really changed the way people in the community saw me and the way I saw myself. Getting to be such an important role model to so many younger girls was really important to me. It made me realize that my thoughts and opinions do matter. I matter. And the more I realized that, the more I started to believe it, and the more people wanted to be around me. Now that I have friends, I wish that I hadn't needed to change my appearance to be socially accepted at Taft. I had genuine self-confidence before I got here and realized that if I wanted to have friends, I would need to change a lot about myself. I
am happy with the way I look now, sure, but sometimes I look in the mirror and I know that I'm not as me as I could be. And that's really hard for me to swallow. I know, I look in the mirror and I realize and I go, wow, I'm another Taft clone. I change myself to be someone guys would want to put on the hot list and someone girls would want to be friends with. And I accomplished that goal, sure, but not without sacrificing all of my individuality. I'm not sure what's more important, having friends or being your true, unadulterated self, but I wish those two had coincided for me more here at Taft.
As a faculty member, the overlap in my personal and professional lives has defined my experience here. Technically, I work from home since I live where I teach, but there's a definite lack of private space. Sure, you can close your door, but you're always accessible. It's not a typical job. My friends ask, why would you do that? Why would you want to do that? Are you crazy? Honestly, it's part of what makes life here so great. Living at Taft, you really get to be a part of the kids' lives in a meaningful way. You get to know them in a lot of different environments. The classroom, dorm, the sports field. My advisee is babysit my daughter. Honestly, the public nature of my life here has made my experiences as an educator a lot more fulfilling. However, with that added fulfillment comes one of the most challenging parts of living and working in a boarding school, and that's finding time for yourself. My first year here, I basically gave help almost every day. All my life, I've done things with a philosophy that there's no point in doing it if you're not going to give it 100%. So I told kids, I'm here, come see me whenever. I didn't realize the effect that would have on my family's private life. Being a Taft teacher 24/7 affects your marriage. It affects your role as a father. I hadn't factored that in. Living at Taft, you get asked to do about 8 million things every day, and you have to be honest with yourself about what you can handle. It's hard to say no to an advisee who wants to go to G's, or a student who needs help with an assignment. But balancing your home and work life is so important. You're only good at this job if you have time for yourself. You find that balance with experience. And luckily for me, I had a lot of help early on. My first year here, when I was basically just trying to keep my head above water and manage all the different hats you're supposed to wear, I was chosen to lead Red Riot. That was really encouraging because the school mons choose which faculty members they want to lead Red Riot. The kids at least liked me, so I knew I was doing something right. There were so many nuances to life at Taft, and being chosen for such an opportunity made me feel like I was finally getting the hang of it all. Another moment like that, one of the most valuable moments in my whole Taft career, was winning the teacher award at graduation last year. It couldn't have come at a better time, because recently I was just feeling depressed about not getting a promotion that I wanted. Having those kids tell me that I was the most influential teacher in their whole class reminded me of why I do what I do, and helped me get past what I thought was a setback that turned out to be a great opportunity for growth. I'm here for the kids, and being able to play an important role in their lives is what makes this boarding school lifestyle so worth it. There are so many opportunities to make an important decision as a faculty member here, which is why working at Taft can be one of the most valuable experiences an educator can have.
There are two sides to my Taft experience. On the one hand, I've had a lot of fun and met some of my best friends here. I've got a lot to be grateful for. On the other hand, though, I've struggled hard to find myself and to really love the fact that I'm a Black woman. One incident that happened last year really shaped the views of the difficulties Black girls face at Taft. I had a crush on this guy. I was really good friends with his friends and they told him that I liked him. He responded with, "I don't want to date a Black girl." That really struck me because I thought, you're Black, your mom's Black, why would you not want to date a Black girl? Why would you not want to date a Black girl? I was heartbroken. Not over him, please. But because he said that. Because he thought he could say that and it would be okay because he didn't understand how wrong it sounded. He didn't think at all about how I, a Black woman, would feel if someone completely dismissed my affection, dismissed any romantic potential solely because of the color of my skin. Luckily, his friends stuck up for me, but it still hurt. It made me realize that Black girls here aren't appreciated the same way as white girls are. I mean, look around. You don't see many Black girls getting played with guys here, and when you do, they're the ones who hang out with the right people and wear the right things. They fit in with the majority. You don't see girls like me getting with guys at Taft. I'm not considered attractive or popular. I always speak my mind. I'm an activist. I stand up for Black causes. I wear my hair natural. I own my identity at Taft, and I love that about myself. But it's not always carefree. Now, I'm not saying that every guy at Taft is racist, far from it. In fact, one of the great things about Taft is that a lot of people want to learn about different cultures if given the opportunity to do so. At World Fest, I see a bunch of white kids asking questions and getting really excited about exposure to other cultures. And I don't think that happens everywhere. So it's cool to be a part of a community that cares, at least to some extent, about cultural diversity. That's why I think Taft should offer an African American literature class or a Hispanic literature class. If we could expose these students to other cultures in an academic setting, I think that a deeper appreciation for these cultures would follow. If we increase that appreciation, we'd see our community change in 1,000 different ways. For example, I'd be willing to bet that there'd be more diversity in positions of leadership. Our class committees would represent our student body, which would mean a lot to the 14 and 15-year-old Black girls who come in, hoping to see someone who looks like them succeeding at Taft. It would make a huge difference, one more than you may think. One of the great things about Taft is you have the opportunity to speak up here. Especially this year, things like UCT meetings and speakers like DeRay McKesson are making people feel more comfortable voicing issues that are important to them on campus and in the larger world. Now, it's our job to really listen to those issues and work towards addressing them. We have a lot of power in this community. Let's use it.